Today is the second day of the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, and one of the under-discussed elements of her record is the time she sided with an employer who called his employee the N-word and against the employee. Because of course she did, hiding behind the shield of originalism. Yeah, the founders didn't specifically outline this exact scenario in the Constitution, so then, yeah, the employer can call his employee the N-word, I guess. That's her philosophy. But here she is answering questions about racial discrimination generally today from Senator Dianne Feinstein.
How should a lower court in the Seventh determine when race-based policies could constitute a materially adverse employment action?
Well, I'm not aware of cases presenting the exact same facts as that.
Just asking you for your view.
You know, I know that the material adverse consequence was the standard at issue in that case. I have to confess that I would need to look at the statute and the precedent to, well, even if I had a specific hypothetical in front of me, I couldn't really say without looking at the statute and the precedent what factors are involved, because I wasn't on that panel and haven't decided a similar case.
Man, am I glad Dianne Feinstein is the Democratic warrior taking her on. Ugh. Barrett's gonna get confirmed, isn't she? These are the Democrats that we have fighting for us, and they're not much of fighters. So, plus I think Barrett comes off as kind of this low-key Catholic mom of many kids. She's unassuming, but her judicial philosophy represents a lot of evil in American politics. And it's disingenuous, and I'm just going to give you more details on this case and then break it down further. Barrett wrote for a unanimous 3-judge panel in 2019 that upheld the dismissal of a workplace discrimination lawsuit by Terry Smith, a Black Illinois transportation employee who sued after he was fired. Smith's claims included that he was called a racial slur by Supervisor Lloyd Colbert. The N-word is an egregious racial epithet, Barrett wrote in Smith v. Illinois Department of Transportation. That said, Smith can't win simply by proving that the word was uttered. He must also demonstrate that Colbert's use of this word altered the conditions of his employment and created a hostile or abusive working environment. How you can quantify that and show that, I'm not sure. It seems pretty clear. Barrett went on to say that Smith introduced no evidence that Colbert's use of the N-word changed his subjective experience of the workplace. To be sure, Smith testified that his time at the department caused him psychological distress, but that was for reasons that predated his running with Colbert and had nothing to do with his race. His tenure at the department was rocky from the outset because of his poor track record. A possible colleague of Barrett's took a different view on racial slurs in 2013. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, then serving as a federal appeals court judge in Washington, D.C., said one utterance was enough. But in my view, being called the N-word by a supervisor suffices by itself to establish a racially hostile work environment. Yeah, that epithet has been labeled variously, a term that sums up all the bitter years of insult and struggle in America, pure anathema to African Americans, and probably the most offensive word in English, Kavanaugh wrote. No other word in the English language so powerfully or instantly calls to mind our country's long and brutal struggle to overcome racism and discrimination against African Americans. In short, the case law demonstrates that a single sufficiently severe incident may create a hostile work environment actionable under federal anti-discrimination laws. So she's even more racist than Brett Kavanaugh. Awesome. Awesome. But she's a nice lady. No evidence that the use of the N-word by the boss to his employee creates a hostile work environment? No evidence? This is the standard sanctimonious ticky-tack BS that conservative justices do when they're talking about these cases. Because you couldn't show me in words, in documents, that 2 + 2 = 4 on October 8th, 2014, right? Well, I'm throwing your whole case out. No, it's common sense. It's right here in front of me. Well, the text didn't show it, and it didn't translate exactly to the Constitution in this very specific notion that I'm now applying. So, yeah, I'm siding with the more powerful, usually corporate actor and screwing over working people. That is the Scalia brand of conservative judicial philosophy that is just so disingenuous, but treated with some reverence by people that cover this, as if it's actually an actionable use of the law. I mean, it is actionable because unfortunately there are a lot of conservative justices, but as if it's not just a way, a ruse to get through Republican policies, as if it's some sort of principled stance. Originalism, textualism, whatever you call it, it is a trick. It makes conservatism seem superior or digestible because you're saying it under the guise of, oh, we're just looking at the letter of the law, we're just looking at the Constitution. It's definitely not completely immoral and horrible to regular people. We're just interpreting the Constitution as it is written. But the Constitution has so much ambiguity in it on purpose. They wanted justices to be able to look at cases in their specific context and gave that wiggle room there. So, for example, the word unreasonable is used in the Constitution. Unreasonable searches and seizures. Is unreasonable a very specific 2 + 2 = 4 term? No. You're supposed to interpret what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. So this facile, childish way that textualists, originalists view the Constitution, they don't actually even believe it. Barrett has talked about how she doesn't think Brown v. Board of Education potentially makes sense. But it's that, yes, it does. It does. It makes sense under the Constitution, I mean. It's just a way to excuse away your horrific policies. That's really all it is. Because if you're somebody that lives in America in the year 2020, you believe in Brown v. Board of Education. You believe in these rights. It doesn't matter how they came about, really. You believe that they should be preserved. But when it comes to these conservatives who just want to pretend that they're just reading the Constitution and the letter of the law, that's not what it's ever about. It's a intellectual shield from their immorality. And that's Amy Coney Barrett.